Welcome to a short course on person-centered planning elements. Successfully finishing this training satisfies the requirement for completing 3 hours of person-centered planning training based on the 2010 version of the plan. This course contains audio. Please turn on your computer speakers or plug in your headphones. The person-centered plan format changes have been a collaborative effort of people with disabilities, families, service providers, and Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse staff. Input was asked for and received from all segments of the disability areas we represent through community dialogue, conversations, email, and telephone. The person-centered plan revisions take into careful consideration new legislative requirements, new priorities that have emerged, innovative approaches that are available, and/or evaluative information that has provided new direction for the plan. The Person-Centered Planning Instruction Manual has also been updated. It is meant to enhance your knowledge and skills related to person-centered planning and to be used as a tool to help guide documentation of a person-centered plan. You are strongly encouraged to read and understand its contents. It is available on the Division's website. This training is meant to help plan developers understand the value of good planning, to know how to prepare and document plans, and to be able to measure progress toward plan goals and objectives. Competencies are the main ideas to be learned in the course. Course content. Although many of you have been using a person-centered plan format for some time, this course walks through the person-centered plan as if you were seeing it for the first time. This ensures that you will not miss anything, and everyone will have the same exposure to what is being described. Because you must understand how person-centered thinking leads to good plans, part of this course provides an overview of person-centered thinking and planning. You have an opportunity to reflect on your own practice and agency in regard to the issues discussed or to engage in an activity. Competencies for this course include to be able to identify what is important to the individual and family and what is important for them and use both in developing the PCP. To develop plans that show individuals and families as the driving force behind their treatment, supports, and services. To develop plans that honor goals and aspirations for a lifestyle that promotes dignity, respect, interdependence, mastery, and competence with meaningful options for change. To develop plans that support a fair and equitable distribution of system resources, and to develop plans that measure progress in the specific preventive, diagnostic, therapeutic, and rehabilitative needs of the individual. If people or families who use services are to have self-directed lives within their own communities, then you who play a primary role in facilitating service plans and providing services and supports need to have person-centered thinking skills. Person-centered thinking provides a set of value-based skills that changes the way we see individuals and families, changes the way we support individuals and families, and sets the stage for ongoing learning about individuals and families and acting upon that learning. Person-centered thinking also provides a set of tools that can assist you in collecting information that ensures your document includes what is important to and for the person, and that provides a way to act upon what you learn. Learning and supporting the use of person-centered thinking skills and tools result in plans that are useful and acted on, so that the lives of people who use services will improve. They provide several ways to get plans started, revised, and updated, and plans occur naturally, needing less effort and time. Person-centered planning is a process. It empowers people to be the driving force behind their treatment, supports, and services. It brings those involved in the person's life together to plan actions based on assessments and information collected regarding what is important to and for the person. Each plan can only reflect the information available or known at any given time. As you gather more information and learn more about the person, you will be able to revise the plan based on what you know now about the person and plan. While there are many elements to consider in person-centered planning, perhaps the most important thing to remember is that it is meant to be an ongoing, interactive team process. There are key values and principles that serve as the foundation of person-centered planning. It is important to understand these values so that you can apply them in your work. Person-centered planning builds on the individual's and family's strengths, gifts, skills, and contributions. This point of view may seem so obvious that it requires no thought, but let's think again. Typically, assessments point out the person's or family's deficits, and diagnoses are based on what is wrong with the person. There's nothing incorrect about that, but people and families are better able to make changes when the focus is positive, not negative. It can take effort to find out what the strengths and gifts are, and even more effort to figure out how to make meaningful plans around them. Take a minute to think about someone you have worked with or know about. Would it be difficult to tease out some gifts or attributes the individual has? Why or why not? Can you think of ways to use these attributes in the person-centered plan? How would that benefit the planning with that person? Person-centered planning supports personal empowerment and provides meaningful options for individuals and families to express preferences and to make informed choices in order to identify and achieve their hopes, goals, and aspirations. Individuals and families may need your help learning how to express preferences and make informed choices. We want the people you work with to make informed choices about their services and supports. What are some tangible ways you or your agency is or is not creating an environment for that to happen? Person-centered planning is a framework for providing services, treatment, supports, and interventions that meet the individual's and family's needs and that honor goals and aspirations for a lifestyle that promotes dignity, respect, interdependence, mastery, and competence. If you want to help people make changes they want and need, this is the heart of the process. Can you think of tangible ways you and your agency show respect? What are some things that could be done? Person-centered planning supports a fair and equitable distribution of system resources. Reality always intrudes on how we wish things were. System resources are not infinite. Your job is to balance what this person and family needs with what the system may provide. That doesn't mean that you only provide what is already available. It does mean that you need to be creative. What are some of the things you or your agency does or could do to meet someone's needs within finite resources? What can our system provide? What can other systems provide? What can be provided by services and supports available to everyone? Person-centered planning processes create community connections. They encourage the use of natural and community supports to assist in ending isolation, disconnection, and disenfranchisement by engaging the individual and family in their community. One of the tenets of person-centeredness is, to the extent possible, to move the person and family from dependence on paid services to natural supports, things available to anyone in the community. These are sustainable over time, and they include the person and family in their own community. Have you included things like Boys and Girls Clubs, 12-step programs, church, sports, etc. in your planning? How has that worked? Person-centered planning sees individuals and families in the context of their culture, ethnicity, religion, and gender. All of the elements that compose a person's individuality and a family's uniqueness are acknowledged and valued in the planning process. Encouraging people to participate in social or community activities that are consistent with their interests and cultural viewpoints is one way to support cultural diversity. Person-centered planning supports mutually respectful partnerships between individuals, families, and providers or professionals, and recognizes the legitimate contributions of all parties involved. This means that creating change in individuals and families is a team effort, and individuals and families are part of the team. They have responsibilities, as do the others on the team. On the one hand, this means you are not alone in the effort. On the other, it means you need to include others in the process. For children and youth and their families in the public system, the Child and Family Team process is the vehicle for person-centered planning. Children with serious emotional disturbances face challenges in many aspects of their daily lives, at home, in school, in social situations, in the justice system, and in the community. Because of this, they need coordinated services and supports from a variety of child-serving agencies, as well as natural supports located in their home community. The System of Care approach, supported in North Carolina, is a coordinated network of community services and supports that are organized to meet these challenges. The System of Care model is not a program. It's a philosophy of how care should be delivered. This approach to services recognizes the importance of family, school, and community, and promotes each child's full potential by addressing physical, emotional, intellectual, cultural, and social needs, and as such is person-centered. Family and child teams are made up of family members and representatives of their community services and supports who come together to create, implement, and update a plan with the child, youth, or student and family. The plan builds on the strengths of the child, youth, and family and addresses their needs and desires and dreams. If you have not already heard some version of the phrase, "If you didn't document it, you didn't do it," you most likely will. The service record is the only written evidence of the quality of care delivered by an agency. It is the agency's legal business record. Record keeping serves as a formal and systematic accounting of an individual's need for services and creates a written record that demonstrates over time how you and other providers have responded to those needs through service delivery. When you carefully and accurately document in the person's service record, you are also describing the individual's response to the treatment and services provided over time. Using your documentation and the documentation of other providers, on an ongoing basis, you and the individual and family can measure progress toward goals and assess the effectiveness of the planned course of treatment. All Medicaid services are based on a finding of medical necessity. Documentation is especially important for showing that there is medical necessity for the services to be provided. All Medicaid, mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse services must be medically necessary for meeting the specific preventive, diagnostic, therapeutic, and rehabilitative needs of the individual. Preventive means to anticipate the development of a condition and to take steps to stop it from occurring. Diagnostic means to examine specific symptoms and facts to understand or explain a condition. Therapeutic means to preserve health or to treat disorders or disabilities. Rehabilitative means to restore a condition, skill, or ability that the person has lost for a more optimal state of health. Along with plans, service notes are the heart of the clinical record. They should document the individual's ongoing progress and response to those interventions, treatments, and supports over time. They should also reflect significant events that occur in the individual's life that may impact progress during the course of services. Each service note should have its own value as documentation of a separate and unique event and should reflect the actual and relevant activities that occurred during the service event, important issues discussed, interventions provided, the effectiveness of the intervention or the individual's response, and relevant observations and updates that occurred and were specific to the service delivery provided that day. Assessments must show the medical necessity for admitting the person and family into services or supports. Plans must show that the person is in need of preventive, diagnostic, therapeutic, and/or rehabilitative services and supports. Further documentation must show that there is medical necessity for the person continuing to receive services and supports. And finally, documentation must show that the person is ready for discharge. You can find more information about documentation in the Records Management and Documentation Manual on the Division's website. Here is the form itself. Put the person's preferred name at the top. Next, fill in the person's legal name, date of birth, Medicaid number, and service record number. If the plan is not a CAP-MRDD plan, enter the date the PCP was completed in the first box on the second line. If it is a CAP-MRDD plan, enter the plan meeting date and effective date in the second box on the second line. If the plan is not a CAP-MRDD plan, enter the date the PCP was completed in the first box on the second line. If it is a CAP-MRDD plan, enter the plan meeting date and effective date in the second box on the second line. The actual profile of the person begins with a positive focus on the person's gifts and skills. Learning what is likable and admirable about the person helps to focus on a person's attributes and abilities rather than on deficits. It presents the person in a way that he or she might wish to be seen, a capacity view rather than a deficit view in a document that belongs to the person. These gifts, skills, and positive attributes are of key importance in all person-centered approaches because they help to guide the person in making the connections and overcoming the barriers to a full life in the person's community. For example, ask the person, "What is great about you? What are you especially good at? What do people who know you say is great or special about you?" If you find people don't feel comfortable with these questions or don't understand what you're getting at, try asking them to tell you what their mother or father or sister or best friend would say about them if they were bragging to a friend about the person. In addition to talking to the person to whom the plan belongs, ask those who know and care about this person, What is great about this person? What is he or she especially good at? What about this person makes you smile? What are the special talents that this person has? What are the personality traits that make this person who he or she is? Knowing skills and positive attributes about the person is very important in establishing what is important to and how best to support the person, the next thing in the plan that will be determined. One of the essential concepts within person-centered thinking is that of understanding the balance between what is important to and important for the person or family to whom the plan belongs. This skill is critically important, not only in gathering information for the person-centered profile, but throughout the complete planning process. What is important to a person or family includes only what the person is saying with their words and with their behavior. It is easy to understand this concept by thinking about what it's like to live with a teenager. Many of you may be parents of teenagers, or at least remember what it's like to be a teen. When your teenage daughter Marissa gets off the school bus, blasts through the front door, throws her book bag on the floor, runs up the stairs, and slams the door to her room, she is delivering a message. As the parent, someone who knows her very well, you likely know what that message is. It may mean that she has just had a fight with her boyfriend Luke and that she needs time and space to be alone for a while. Or it may mean that she has had a really bad day at school and she wants you to follow her up the stairs and talk to her. These scenarios are what is meant by determining what a person is saying with their behavior. Given the example of Marissa coming home from school, it is critical to know whether her behavior means, "Leave me alone, I'll come to you when I'm ready," or if it means, "I need you to come and comfort me right now." Many people or families in the public mental health, developmental disabilities, and substance abuse system have found themselves in situations where they felt they were expected to say what others wanted them to say. If a person is saying what they think we want to hear, it is important to listen to their behavior to help decide what is really being said, to understand the underlying message of truth. You may need to use a symbolic third ear, that is, using your intuition and awareness to interpret what you are observing about the person. What is important for people or families are those things that need to be kept in mind regarding issues of health or safety and what others see as important for the person to be a valued member of the community in relationships, school, work, etc. Why do this? Finding the balance between important to and important for is the fundamental person-centered thinking skill. It lets people know that you value finding out what is important to them, and that planning will include these things, as well as things important for them. People and families using the public service system may be in circumstances where others exercise control over them. What is important for them is addressed while what is important to them is ignored or seen as what is done when time permits. In this box, list things that the person is telling you with their words and behavior that really matter to him or her. It is critical to listen and write down everything the person says, even if others who have contributed information disagree. Learning to listen carefully for what really matters to people or families is what assists you in developing the fundamental person-centered thinking skill of finding the balance between what is important to and for the person. For example, ask the person who the important people are in his or her life, what activities are they most interested in, what things they have that they treasure, and are there places they like to go? Also ask about people, things, activities, etc. that the person does not want in his or her life. Consider this example. A teenage boy, Dan, has mental health concerns, and he sees adventure, new experiences, cars, and sports as important to him, while his parents may see safety, protection, and security as important for their son. Both points of view are valuable. People close to the person tell you what's important for the person. This information goes here. This section becomes a collection of preferred ways to support the person or family in staying healthy and safe, in accessing the community in a way that makes sense for him or her, and doing so in a way that stays in balance with the things that are most important to the person. This is where you are focusing on the balance between what is important to and important for a person. In order to protect someone's health, safety, and consequently the person's freedom, it is necessary to identify health and safety risk factors and to create supports and backup plans aimed at minimizing risk. Risk should be addressed by helping a person look at ways to be safe within the choices made. Overall health and wellness issues should be addressed here. Review the list of items in the What is Important To section. Determine what support is needed so the person gets those things, or gets more of those things, or maintains those things. Let's go back to the example of Dan, who loves cars and sports. Those things are important to him. Remember, his parents feel safety and protection are important for him. Ask Dan, his parents, and others to consider what support Dan would need in order to get involved with cars while maintaining the safety level important to his parents. What are things we would need to do or know to help Dan participate in these activities? For example, you may hear things like, Dan cannot drive, but he could ride with someone else. Or, Dan would need to get a driving permit to start the process of getting a license. Or, Dan loves to watch NASCAR on TV. These types of supports, coupled with what you know is important to Dan, will translate later into goals or objectives, along with more traditional mental health treatment options. Perhaps an older teen, who is known to be a responsible driver, would agree to take Dan out on the weekend. Or maybe Dad could take him to a NASCAR race. You will have to find a balance between important to and important for. This section becomes a collection of issues, events, or matters that have been identified by the person, family, or others involved in the planning process as being effective in helping to improve the person's situation, reduce stress or other negative factors, and achieve certain short or long-term outcomes or objectives in the person's life. Determine what's working or not working, what's making sense or doesn't make sense, what needs to be maintained or what needs to change, works best in relation to specific situations. For example, if a person's disability issues are impacting his or her ability to keep a job, then using these concepts can assist the planning process in that area. Let's consider Marie. Marie is 27 years old and has a job as a receptionist at a dentist's office. Her job has been a topic of concern during sessions with her therapist. When talking to Marie about her person-centered plan, you can ask her to write down or to tell you the things about her receptionist job that are working or that are making sense to her. For example, she may say that she really likes Dr. Collins and that she likes talking to the patients when they come in. Also ask what is not working about the job. Marie may tell you she hates getting up early, but part of her job is to open the office at 7:30 each morning. She may also tell you that it doesn't make sense to her when Dr. Collins asked her not to bother the patients by talking to them so much. With permission from Marie, you will also ask Dr. Collins to answer the same questions. What is working or not working? What makes sense or doesn't make sense from his perspective about Marie's job at his office? He may say that it is working, that Marie is a conscientious worker who maintains the appointment book and the files with ease. He may also say that it doesn't make sense that he constantly has to tell her not to have extended conversations with the patients in the waiting room. He may also say that it is not working, that at least twice a week he comes into the office at 8 a.m. and finds Marie has not yet arrived to get things going for the day. What do you do with this information? You will find that if there is conflict, it will generally be between what one person says is working and another person says is not working. In this example, it is easy to see where conflict exists. Marie is chatty with the patients and her boss doesn't like it. And Marie doesn't seem to show up for work on time every day, which causes a problem for the office. These become some areas for developing goals in order to reduce the conflict so that what is really important to and for the person, in this case Marie keeping her job, is maintained. It is best to apply the what's working, not working tool with all the interested parties together. You may want to put a big sheet of paper on the wall with areas for each person to write down what is or is not working. This puts the issues clearly in front of everyone and opens the door for discussion and resolution by determining goals to work toward. Before walking through the action plan, here are some key process elements for action planning. Potential service, support, intervention, and/or treatment options to meet the goals and needs of the individual or family are identified and discussed in collaboration with professionals and other service providers in the publicly funded system of services. The individual or family or legally responsible person must be fully informed of the rationale, evidence, and risks of specific services, supports, interventions, and treatment options in order to make responsible choices based on the options presented. Care should be taken to assure that purchased or funded supports do not take the place of natural supports and community resources when they are available and appropriate to the need. In order to protect a person's health, safety, and consequently the person's freedom, it is necessary to identify his or her health and safety risk factors. These factors should be recorded in the dialogue sections of the plan. Ensure that supports and backup plans aimed at minimizing risk are addressed in the action plan based on the information gathered. Risk should be addressed by helping a person look at ways to be safe within the choices made. Copy and add additional pages of the action plan as needed to address long-range outcomes, characteristics and observations, short-range goals, etc. At the top of the next 3 pages, you will see what is called a header. If you click on the View tab on your Microsoft Office toolbar, you will see a tool titled Header and Footer. Click on this and you will be able to edit the information contained within the header. Text that is entered in the header will appear on the remaining pages of the PCP. Enter the individual's name, date of birth, Medicaid ID number, and the record number in the appropriate blanks of the header. When determining the long-range outcome, make sure that this is an outcome desired by the individual and not a goal belonging to others. Based on the information gathered while developing the person-centered profile, in measurable terms, state the outcome the person or family desires to achieve within a year and/or into his or her future. The next section, Where am I in the process of achieving this outcome, focuses on briefly describing the person's current status, skills, and abilities related to the identified long-range outcome and the person's current level of participation related to this outcome. In other words, what steps have they taken so far along the way to achieving this outcome? It is based on the information gathered while developing the person-centered profile. Include progress on goals over the past years as applicable. Based on the information gathered in developing the person-centered profile and from completed assessments, describe the characteristics and observations of the person that will result in action plans and will justify the short-term goal that will be documented here. Characteristics and observations are those traits, qualities, and actions that are representative of this person and the diagnosis of the person. Examples of characteristics and observations are: is withdrawn, hears voices, has great difficulty in social situations, destroys property, is very angry, unable to stay still, talks about wanting to get high, etc. This section should not include the diagnosis or name of a service as a justification for the service. Use clinical judgment to recognize the relationship between the clinical traits and qualities and the short-term goal. More than one goal may be developed for a single characteristic or observation if necessary to fully address that need. For the short-range goals section, enter a person-centered, measurable objective needed to achieve the long-range outcome. This goal should represent information from the person-centered profile related to what was documented as important to and for the person, generally found in the What's Important To and How Best to Support sections of the profile. In the section Who is Responsible, identify and enter the individual or individuals who will be responsible for implementing and documenting progress toward the goal. When the responsible person is a paid provider, indicate in this box the agency, name, and position of the person. When possible, include the name of that individual as well. Here, identify and enter the specific service or treatment to be used to address the goal and enter the frequency of that service. Based on the How to Support section of the person-centered profile, define and enter the supports and interventions needed to achieve the short-range goal. Target dates may never exceed 12 months from the date on the first page of the plan. In the first column titled Target Date, enter the date the team projects the person can achieve this goal. When that target date has arrived, the qualified professional or licensed professional responsible for the person-centered plan will enter the date progress toward the goal was reviewed in the space labeled Date Goal Was Reviewed. The options for status codes are R for revised, O for ongoing, A for achieved, or D for discontinued. The qualified professional or licensed professional will complete this final column, progress toward goal and justification for continuation or discontinuation of goal. If a goal is not achieved at the time of review, provide narrative information in this space that justifies the reason the team determines to either continue, revise, or discontinue the goal. Repeat this process for describing goals, services, and interventions for each goal needed in this plan. The Crisis Prevention and Intervention Plan includes proactive supports or interventions aimed at preventing a crisis and reactive supports or interventions to employ if there is a crisis. A proactive plan aims to prevent crises from occurring by identifying health and safety risks and strategies to address them. A reactive plan aims to avoid diminished quality of life when crises occur by having a plan in place to respond. Consider what the crisis may look like should it occur, to whom it will be considered a crisis, and how to stay calm and to lend that strength to others in handling the situation capably. It will be important that you know what positive skills the person has which can be elicited and increased at time of crisis. Redirection of energies towards exercising these skills can prevent crisis escalation. Positive behavioral supports may be relied upon as a crisis response. The crisis plan is an active and living document that is to be used in the event of a crisis. After the crisis, the person and staff should meet to discuss how well the plan worked and make changes as indicated. The first section addresses health and behavioral concerns that may trigger the onset of a crisis. In developing this crisis plan, include lessons learned from any previous crisis events. Include information on health and wellness issues. Are there physical, medical issues that contribute to this person's vulnerability to crisis? Are there physical, medical issues that need to be addressed in the wake of a crisis? Describe in detail the known behaviors a person or family may identify which indicate to others that they need to take over responsibility for that person's care and make decisions on that person's behalf. Include information on the kinds of supports that may be effective for this person. Include information on environmental factors that may contribute to the onset of crisis and how those could possibly be controlled. Incorporate information gathered from all three dialogue sections of the person-centered plan. Here you will list everything that can be done to help this person avoid a crisis, such as list coping skills the person has learned or has used in the past to decrease the potential of going into crisis. Provide a detailed description of strategies that will be used to assist the person in avoiding a crisis. Strategies should be based on knowledge, information, and feedback from the person or family and other team members, as well as strategies that have been effective in the past. Include opportunities for the person to exercise calming strategies such as consciously breathing deeply. Incorporate information gathered from the personal dialogue, from the family, guardian, and informal supports dialogues, and from the service or support provider dialogues. In this section, you will focus first on natural and community supports. Begin with the least restrictive steps. Include a process for obtaining backup in case of emergency and planning for use of respite, if an option. List everything you know that has worked to help this person to become stable, such as provide a detailed description of strategies to be implemented to help the person or family stabilize during a crisis. Strategies should be based on knowledge, information, and feedback from the person or family and other team members, as well as effective intervention strategies identified during the person's day-to-day life and from previous crisis and problem resolution. Steps should focus first on natural and community supports, starting with the least restrictive interventions. Incorporate information gathered from the personal dialogue, the family or guardian or informal supports dialogues, and from the service or support provider dialogues. Positive behavioral supports and approaches, other than calling law enforcement to deal with a crisis, should be sought. law enforcement should be called only as a last resort. If calling law enforcement is part of the plan, law enforcement should be involved in the plan development and their agreement obtained ahead of time. Here, detail vital contact information regarding who should be called and when and how they can be reached. The list typically includes, but is not limited to, the following people: the legally responsible person, if not the person the plan is written for, the psychiatric service provider, medical service provider, family members, respite provider, and crisis services provider. This section documents recommendations for interacting with the person receiving a crisis service, such as: list specific detailed information learned from this person or family about the type of interaction and treatment that is helpful during a crisis, and also the type of things that needed to be avoided. Remember, this information is for use at a crisis service, most likely by staff who does not know this individual or family well or at all. Determine what they need to know or do immediately. Identify activities ahead of time which will be followed after a crisis to determine what worked and what didn't work during the crisis episode. Include information as processed and accessed by the individual or family, members of the planning team, response staff, and any others involved in the crisis episode regarding effective and ineffective strategies. Include the process for update or revision of the crisis plan based on information learned. Before reviewing the actual signature page, there are important requirements and options for signatures to think about. The medical necessity of Medicaid-funded services. A licensed physician, licensed psychologist, licensed physician assistant, or licensed family nurse practitioner must sign the person-centered plan in Section A, confirming the requested services are medically necessary, indicating whether the licensed professional signing has had direct contact with the individual, indicating whether the licensed professional signing has reviewed the comprehensive clinical assessment. If not ordered by a licensed professional, a qualified professional must order CAP MRDD services and Medicaid-funded targeted case management services in Section B. The signature confirms one or both of the following: the requested CAP MRDD services are medically necessary, the requested Medicaid-funded targeted case management services are medically necessary. In all cases, the signature and the date of the signature are required. The signature is authenticated when the designated professional signing enters the date next to his or her signature. The signature serves as the service order for services contained in the person-centered plan. Only present the signature page to the licensed professional to sign with the fully completed and dated person-centered plan attached. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. The annual review of medical necessity is due upon the annual rewrite of the person-centered plan. Note: check boxes left blank on the signature pages of the person-centered plan will be returned as incomplete by the Service Authorization Agency. Also, the Department of Health and Human Services shall report the failure of a licensed professional to comply with these requirements to the Licensed Professionals Occupational Licensing Board. The process just described for medical necessity of Medicaid-funded services is recommended for verifying medical necessity and ordering of state-funded services. Following this process, will prevent the possibility of services being provided without a service order should the individual move from state-funded services to Medicaid. Now let's review the signature page itself. Section 1 of the signature page is reserved for the person receiving services. Even if this person is not his or her own legally responsible person, the person should sign if he or she can. The legally responsible person must sign in this section. The signature indicates confirmation and agreement with the services and supports described in the plan, as well as a confirmation of choice of service providers. The third checkbox in this section is for CAP-MRDD PCPs only and must be checked by the person signing. The signature is authenticated when the individual signing enters the date next to his or her signature. No one else may enter the date for the person signing. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. For information on when a minor may sign his or her plan in place of the legally responsible person, refer to the Person-Centered Planning Manual. Section 2 of the signature page is for the staff responsible for the person-centered plan. The qualified professional or licensed professional responsible for person-centered plan development signs and dates the plan, confirming involvement and agreement with the services and supports described in the plan. The form also requests the name of the case management agency. Insert the name of the agency of the person signing this section, whether or not it is specifically a case management agency. This signature and the date of the signature are required. The date of the qualified professional or licensed professional signature should coincide with the PCP completed on date from the first page of the plan. The signature is authenticated when the individual signing enters the date next to his or her signature. No one else may enter the date for the signatory. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. For adults within any disability area, children receiving intellectual, developmental disability, or substance abuse services, and children receiving mental health services that do not meet the criteria I am about to discuss, the person responsible for the person-centered plan signs and dates the plan in this section of the signature page directly under the statement that reads, "Person responsible for the PCP." The following signature confirms the responsibility of the QP or LP for the development of this person-centered plan. The signature indicates agreement with the services and supports to be provided. No one else may enter the date for the signatory. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. For children or adolescents who are less than 21 years old for Medicaid or 18 years old for state-funded services and are receiving or are in need of enhanced services and who are actively involved with the Department of Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention or the adult criminal court system, the signature of the person responsible for the person-centered plan in Part 4 of the signature page attests that he or she has completed the following requirements by putting a check in the appropriate box. Met with the child and family team, or scheduled a child and family team meeting, or assigned a TASC case manager, and conferred with the clinical staff of the applicable LME to conduct care coordination. For children or adolescents meeting this specific criterion, the person responsible for the plan signs and dates it in the section of the signature page after the check boxes just described. No one else may enter the date for the signatory. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. Section 3 of the signature page is for service orders and verification of medical necessity. In Section A, one of the 4 approved licensed professionals signs, confirming medical necessity is present and indicating by the check boxes whether or not he or she has had a direct contact with the individual or whether or not he or she has reviewed the individual's assessment. The licensed professional signs below the check boxes, enters his or her license number, and then authenticates the signature by entering the date signed. No one else may enter the date for the signatory. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. Section B may be used for qualified or licensed professionals to order CAP-MRDD services or targeted case management services for individuals with intellectual developmental disabilities, if these services are not ordered in Section A. Targeted case management services for individuals with mental health or substance abuse diagnoses must be ordered by one of the 4 approved licensed professionals using Section A, not a qualified professional. It is recommended that a qualified or licensed professional also use this section to order state-funded services if not ordered in Section A. The signatory will check all appropriate boxes in this section indicating that medical necessity for CAP-MRDD services is present and/or medical necessity for targeted case management services is present and/or medical necessity for state-funded services is present. The staff then signs his or her name, enters a license number if applicable, and enters the date. No one else may enter the date for the signatory. A provider may not bill Medicaid for services until this signature is acquired. Section 4 of the signature page is for the signatures of other team members. Other team members have the option to sign and date the person-centered plan, confirming participation and agreement with the services and supports described in the plan. Do not present the signature page to any individual required to sign it if it is not attached to a fully completed and dated person-centered plan. Do not ask for a signature without it being dated by the signatory. A provider may not date any or all of the signatures on this page except for his or her own. In general, it is important to remember that signatures may not predate the plan. Thank you for your time and attention.